Do I just say my name?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Rosalyn, and for me, going to India this past 2 weeks has been, I would say, honestly, a really good experience, just because I think for the past semester, I've been struggling a lot with just how I have all these beliefs about like who God is, like what being a Christian means, yet when I look at my life, I see that there's like a drastic difference between the way I live my life and the way that I know I should be living my life. And so the past summer, I've just been living with this constant tension of like, I'm not living out the way that I should be doing. And so coming into India, it was like the first time I think in my whole life where I actually was just like lived out for God without any reservations. Like whether that meant like dancing like crazy on stage, or like leading worship, or like praying out loud in front of other people, like and sharing the gospel, doing testimonies and doing skits, like doing stuff that I like never do or never feel comfortable doing. Like all these things I felt like I could, like it was the first time in my life that I was able to do without like any fear or any doubt or any like not concern, like no concern about like what other people thought about me. And so I think it was the first time in my life I felt like completely at peace of like, this is my identity, like this is my identity as like a daughter in Christ, and this is the way like life is. And just being in India and every day like waking up and being like, God, like what do you want to do with us, like, and your main priority is like trying to bring salvation to like other people. Like everything that we worry about like at home, it just becomes a lot less important. And so I think just like having so much joy in the simplicity of just living for God and like living for his kingdom, and like having so much joy in that, and then having no fear and like who I am, and like no concern about what other people think of me. Like it was like the first time in my life that I was able to experience that, and I really hope, I don't know, I'm hoping that like when I go back home, like I'll still be able to like live that out every day, like wherever I am, whether that's in school or at work or wherever else. But I don't know, it's just like when you are able to experience like what God has for you and the plans I have for you, you realize like, yeah, being a Christian is hard, but there's a reason why he wants us to live this way, because there's so much joy in like what he's called us to be. Yeah.
Most enjoyable moment.
Should we do more?
Yeah. Enjoy.
ANA からご案内いたします。ANA 東京成田空港行き100周年がご利用のお客様はインオーバーゲートへお越しください。
My most enjoyable moment was I was just going to talk about that. I was just going to talk about what I talked about already.
Oh. Okay. Challenging.
I think the most challenging thing on this trip was trying to figure out like choosing to trust God, because I think on this trip I had like a lot of expectations of what was going to happen in terms of like seeing like a lot of healings or signs and wonders, and when like a lot of those things didn't happen, I was like, okay, is like my faith even real? And like I started to doubt, like how do I know that when I pray for something and I ask God for something that I'll really receive it? Like I know that it says that in the Bible, but like how do I know that that's really real? And like what's the point of praying if like you don't see any of these things come into tuition? So like I think on this trip, like there was one time we were having a prayer conference, and it was the first time in a long time that I started praying for my family, and I really felt, I wasn't just saying the words, but I really felt like something was going to change in my family. Like I really believed like God was going to do something in my family, and maybe even use me in my family to bring them closer to God. And like that was the first time I actually really believed that God was going to do something. But then the next day I started to like doubt a lot. I started to doubt like, okay, if I really ask these things, like how do I know it's not just me? Is this like going too long?
No, it's fine.
Okay. Like I started to doubt like, is this just me? Like am I just going off of an emotional high, or like is God really speaking to me? Like are these convictions real? And so that morning I just went to go pray by myself, and it was the first time I really just like asked God for a sign. Like I asked God to show me that he was listening to me, and that like when I ask him for things, like he's actually going to answer me. And so I think after that prayer, like the entire trip, I was just like waiting for something to happen, like waiting for like this big miracle to happen. And then when it didn't happen at the end of the trip, I was really disappointed. And then there was like a point in time, there's like a point in time where like the last day of our trip, nothing had happened. And so I remember there was like a pivotal moment where I was like, okay, like am I gonna choose to like not believe in God? Like am I gonna choose to just like ignore all the things that he has been doing in my life this entire trip and choose to be like, oh, just because he didn't give me the expectations that I wanted, I'm just gonna ignore him? Or am I gonna choose to believe that like God is still good, even if he doesn't give me the things that he expects, but that like he is working in different ways? And that was the first time that like when I fell into that place of like doubt and fear, that I chose to be like, yeah, God is greater, and like I can't ignore everything that he's been doing in my life. And just looking at like how good he's been this entire trip, like the way he's been growing me, the way he's been growing every other member of our team, and just the way he's been working in India and through this ministry, like there's no way that God is not real. And so at that moment I really just chose to like trust in him. And then I think looking back, I do realize like God has been answering like that prayer, because even after I prayed that prayer of like asking God for a sign, like immediately after I stopped praying, he sent like 2 girls walked in and prayed for me afterwards. And then when I went up to my room like 10 minutes later, like Pastor John came and knocked on my door and like asked to talk to me and just prayed for me too. And I think, and then like the last day that morning, Pastor John ended up going over to like doing devotions, and then the verse he chose was like 1 John something something. But pretty much what it talked about was like when you live with no condemnation and you trust in God, like God will give you like what you ask for, like you will receive what you ask for. And I think that was just, that in itself was enough for me to show me that like, you know, when we choose to choose God over like all the doubts and fears that we have, like God will be faithful. And for me, I think even coming back, like going to Taiwan now and spending so much time with my family this summer, it's my choice whether or not to believe that like God will be able to use me and that something will happen in my family, or I can just like let things be like the way they've been for like the past like however many years. And I think even just like everything that's happened in this trip is given me a lot more hope to believe like, yeah, God is gonna be able to change my family. Like, and when I have this conviction, like I can trust that something's gonna happen, even if it's not gonna happen like this week or like within the next month. Like if it takes like a year or 5 years, like as Christians, like we choose to have faith and like put faith in something that we can't see, but it's not based on like anything. It's not based just on like blind faith, but it's like based on everything good that like God has done to us in the past. And it's our job to not just like place our own agenda on God, but to like open our eyes to be able to see like all the ways he's been working in our lives, even if it's not what we expect. And I think that's what the biggest part of what I've learned at India is, that like God is always working, like God is always blessing us. It's just we have to realize that like sometimes he's gonna work in unexpected ways, but he's still there, and like we have a choice whether or not we want to see it.